Welcome to Building Better Communities with Bob Hart, the podcast that dives into the stories of the leaders in commercial real estate and beyond as they talk about their careers, the market, and what it takes to build better communities. On today's episode, Ambassador Yossi Gal, Vice President for University Advancement and External Relations at Hebrew University, joins Bob on the podcast. Now for your host, Bob Hart.
Hi, welcome to our latest episode of Building Better Communities. I have the great pleasure and honor today of being with a very special guest who's come all the way from the state of Israel. I think he just landed today, actually, into the United States, Ambassador Yossi Gal. Ambassador, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
So what brought you here today? Before we talked about your background, you've come a long way to the United States, to Los Angeles. You're obviously a great ambassador, not only of politics, but of university advancement with the American Friends of Hebrew University. What brought you here today?
Well, we at Hebrew University are very fortunate to have friends, very active friends all around the world. And one of the most prominent offices we have is here in the Los Angeles area. So I come here quite often to meet with friends, tell them about our university, how we're doing. We think together, and that's the reason why I'm here.
Let's talk a little bit about Hebrew University, because although it's been around for over 100 years, it was founded by the founding fathers were Einstein, Martin Buber, Freud, many others, and you're a graduate there of this university itself. Maybe demystify it a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about it and its foundations, which I think would be very informative to people, and how many, the things that are most important to you.
Well, the departure point is that in our tradition, in our Jewish tradition, there's nothing more important than education. Education is everything. So in 1918, long time before the State of Israel was established, in fact, the whole generation before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, 1918, the cornerstone was laid
in
Jerusalem on Mount Scopus. And 7 years later, April 1st, 1925, the university opened its doors. Now, the message to me is very, very simple. It really shows that the founding fathers were very, very smart, and they had their priorities right. You first establish an institution of higher learning, one of the best in the world, and a generation later you establish a state. By the time the State of Israel was established in 1948, the whole infrastructure was there because of Hebrew University. The whole infrastructure in terms of the economists, in terms of the medical staff, in terms of the Supreme Court and the judiciary system. And speaking of the founding fathers, you mentioned some of their names. Of course, first and foremost, it's Albert Einstein, undoubtedly the number one scientist of the 20th and so far of the 21st century.
Was he still living in Europe and Germany at that time?
Yeah, he was living. No, he was living he started in Switzerland. He lived in Germany, but he finished his life in Princeton in the United States. But he was the founding father of the university. By the way, you and all of your listeners, the viewers, are invited to come visit the Einstein archives at the Hebrew University.
Which you control.
Einstein, before he died, he bequeathed all of his personal belongings to the Hebrew University. 82,000 documents in his clean, neat handwriting, and his entire library are there for people to see and to appreciate the giant that this scientist
Tell
was.
us a little bit more about the center you're building that is underway.
Well,
right now.
1 second before I get to the center, of course, alongside with Albert Einstein, there were giants like Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychoanalysis, Martin Buber, the German philosopher, Chaim Nachman Bialik, who later became the national poet of the State of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, the first president of the State of Israel. He himself was a chemist, a British chemist. He is the chemist that invented acetone, the material that was used in bombs, making bombs. Nowadays,
Nail polish afterwards.
yeah, nowadays it's used to polish your
Had a different
your
use.
nails. And this is really the heritage that we carry on our shoulders as we enter the centennial. The coming year is going to be a very, very significant year because we'll be celebrating 100 years since the opening.
So when these great names, these great founders were involved in building this community, which became Hebrew University, what was the initial mission behind that? For Israel to have a broader university, or did it focus on I know agriculture was important then, and
I mean, the intention was to study and to teach and to study. These are the two most important elements in the Jewish tradition, and I think they should be the most important things in every tradition, to teach and to study and to explore and to make science, and this is what the university is all about. The university developed in the last 100 years to be one of the leading in the world in being a comprehensive university. We are a big university with 24,000 students.
that is big.
6 different campuses, 8 Nobel Prize winners, 300 Israel Prize winners,
Wow.
1 Fields Medal, 2 Turing Medals, and I can go on and on and on.
And many inventions and creations. have
And
come out of
many
that.
inventions and creations that people don't even think about. I'll just mention 2. In your salad, you like the cherry tomatoes, right?
I do, especially if they're crisp and
Yeah, the
juicy.
cherry tomatoes came out of Hebrew University. We have the only faculty of agriculture in Israel, and the cherry tomatoes come from there. You probably heard about, nowadays everybody's talking about, cars that are very sophisticated. But you heard about Mobileye? Mobileye was a company that came up with, years back, with that device that alerts you when your car gets too close to the car in front of you. That was Mobileye. Mobileye was sold.
So is this the technology that's in the driverless cars?
Yes. So
Amazing.
Mobileye was sold for $15.3 billion here in America. And I can think of many, many others. The beauty of the university is that it is really multidiscipline. And I can think of every discipline you want, but I'll just give you the 3 or 4 main areas that we try to concentrate. Number 1, which is of extreme importance for us, is what we call human health. And human health divides into a number of subcategories. First of all, neurodegenerative diseases. Life expectancy keeps going up, and with it, all of these things that we don't really know how to treat, Alzheimer, Parkinson, dementia, and this is very big at the university. Number 2 is cancer research. Cancer still kills so many people. We have quite a number of groups that deal with cancer research. But third, this is something that is developed only here in America and in Israel. This is what is called computational medicine. What is computational medicine? This is the medicine that brings to the table the doctor, the researcher, and the computer engineer. And the idea is, how do you harness artificial intelligence and big data in the service of medicine? I have to tell you that the students, only 23 every year, that take this, they are the nerds of the nerds. To do both computer engineering and to do medical degree.
Is it to create more rapid diagnostics, or what are some of the outcomes of this?
Well, some of the outcomes is the use of big data that is available in order, and you need huge computers for that, in order to make the analysis that can help the researcher trying to, say, treat a certain cancer.
Interesting.
Yeah. So this is one area. The other area that is huge at the university is high tech. If Israel is what it is in terms of the startup nation, in terms of the resilience of its economy, it's because of the high technology. So we have a very, very strong faculty of computer engineering. We are developing a faculty of electrical engineering, quantum physics, nanotechnology. These are all very big things. Number 3 is food technology. We are, again, one of the best in the world in developing substitutes to protein, substitutes to food. It's clear that in 10, 20 times years, humanity will be facing a real challenge. How do we feed the billions upon billions? The shortages. So what they do is to try and find, substitutes. And quite a number of companies came out of the Hebrew University. Last but not least, we also try to be, very active on sustainability and climate change.
Which is a big issue in the real estate development industry.
Yeah, so these are some of the things, while I stress that we are a comprehensive university. So if you are interested in ancient languages, you'll find it at the university. If you want the history of this or that, you'll find it at the university. If music is your thing, it's here at the Hebrew University. This is the beauty of a comprehensive university.
Do you have other university partners outside of Israel that you have exchange programs with, and how are you building that community outside of Israel?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, science recognizes no boundaries, and academia knows no limitations. And the answer is, of course, definitely. And you always aim to team up with those that are better than you are. So we have very close relationship, be it on research or exchange of students or joint programs with the leading universities here in the United States, with some of the Ivy League universities. We have here in this area, but also in Europe, some of the universities that are leaders in their fields. Because again, go back to the world of science. And scientists are measured by the papers they produced. I challenge you, if you find a paper that is written only by one scientist, I'll donate.
Yeah, the collaborative.
It is a collaborative effort. So you have a scientist from the United States, you have a scientist from Japan, you have a scientist from Israel. It has to be collaborative. We live in a small world. We live in a small village. And
it's becoming even smaller.
Becoming even smaller. But in science, without collaboration and without working together, I mean, the pace that science progresses will be diminished in a very significant way.
Well, let's pivot for a minute. I mean, you've had a 5-decade career since you started, I think, in the mid-'70s, and advancing the mission of Hebrew University has barely been over the last decade. But prior to that, you were advancing the mission of the State of Israel. You went into, I guess you'd call it your version of the diplomatic corps and foreign service, and served in a number of different capacities. Talk about a little bit about your career as an ambassador, both in Europe and work in the foreign service, and how that evolved for you as a young man.
Well, it's a very good question. It's a very good question. I remember that when I was studying at Hebrew University, even though I was not studying, diplomacy or international relations, I was more in the area of statistics and operations research. But the urge to be part of the public service was such that so many of us wanted to be part of the service. And if in the service, then the foreign service is really the top. I mean, this is the top of the
Pinnacle of.
the pinnacle of the.
Well, Israel had only been a state for not even 3 decades at that time.
Yes,
Over 2 decades.
Indeed. But the notion that you, especially coming from the background that I came from, that you can represent your countries in Washington, and I started in Washington. I was very lucky.
You were posted there twice, right?
I was very lucky to be posted in Washington for the first time and posted in Washington for the second time. And Washington, mind you, is the major league of diplomacy. And from there, as a young person, to get the ambassadorship in the Netherlands.
How old were you at that time?
Well, I was 40-something, a young ambassador in the Netherlands.
That's a young ambassador.
Which I liked very, very, very much. And then I was the head of the Foreign Service. I was the Director General of the Foreign Service.
So you came back to
which
Israel.
would be the equivalent here in this country of, say, Under-Secretary of State, which is the highest non-political level. And then I took the ambassadorship in Paris, which was a very, very special experience. I mean, because of the Jewish community.
And this was during the 80s, I believe, right? Or the 90s?
No, this was much later.
Later.
Much later. This was at a time where things were not easy in France. I remember vividly the massacre of the school children in Toulouse, where Jewish kids were massacred by the 3 terrorists there, and the ensuing acts of anti-Semitic violence against
it's been a huge
the
issue in France.
And the Jewish community there is, the community in France is the third community by size after Israel and the United States. At the time, there were 600,000 Jews. And naturally, I felt very, very close to the community. And to the credit of the French government, I have to say that they were very sensitive in protecting their Jewish citizens. There are plenty of synagogues and kindergartens and this. And at every given moment, there were 3 soldiers standing in front of every one of these Jewish institutions.
Do you think some of the problems in France emanated from a lack of assimilation of people that came there from the Arab world, as opposed to, like in the United States, people from that world have assimilated more?
Well, in retrospect, I think that you're looking at a much wider phenomenon. Look at Europe today. I don't know at this point in time to tell you where this is leading, where this is going. Examples. Look at one of my favorite countries, the Netherlands.
Yes, you spent time there.
I spent time there 5 years. Look at what happened there just a few weeks ago when the Israeli basketball team was, football team, was playing, and the fans were, you saw the very bad pictures from the Netherlands. Look at Germany and what is happening with politics in Germany. Things are changing all the time, and
you see it regressing? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't know. I mean, history will tell if it is regressing or not, but I think that the sensitivity to the rights of minorities should be much more sharpened right now. And I, of course, I care about everybody, but I especially care about my Jewish brothers everywhere.
Yes, I see that. Recently, there's been political turmoil in France again.
You
with the
can
government.
say that again, yes.
How do you read that?
Well, I'll tell you something. One thing that I learned in my long career in diplomacy is that it is inappropriate for a foreign diplomat to really make remarks about others. I can make all the remarks I want about my own country, about my own university. I don't think that it's the right thing. I still feel this, feeling of a diplomat. And diplomats are not always very open to speak their mind. You know what the definition of a diplomat is?
No,
You speak French?
only a little.
A little. Okay. The French definition of a diplomat is un diplomate est une personne qui réfléchit à deux fois avant de ne rien dire. A diplomat is a person who thinks twice before saying nothing. So here I'm not a diplomat, but I rather speak about my university, about my
course.
country.
What do you talk to young people? You must encounter an awful lot of young people through the university system, and you probably mentor them along the way. What do you, when you talk to them about careers in diplomacy or communications and other areas, how do you talk about your experience to them in terms of developing their own career?
Oh, that's really a critical question, because yes, you're absolutely right. I have them come to my office time and time again, and I'm always more than happy to sit with these impressive young boys and girls and really share with them my experience, the good side and the bad side. I mean, it's not all rosy. I mean, you do pay a price when you are an American diplomat or an Israeli diplomat. I mean, for one thing is the fact that we are always threatened, okay, and you are protected, so you have to, you lose some of your, but what I tell them is that, the dream of every young Israeli is how, I think that the dream of most young Israelis is how to make our country much, much, much better, much stronger. Today, a country is measured, the strength of a country is measured by the strength of its military, by its economic might, by its social cohesion, and by its international standing. I mean, we do live in a world that is, collaborative in nature.
Our business is collaborative.
Well, I mean, the second thing that I tell them is that be what may, we should always look for allies. And there is one ally that is more important than anybody else, and this is the United States of America. I mean, and this alliance is based on the fact that we have the same values, the same beliefs, and we should do everything possible to maintain this alliance and to maintain it with everybody, with both sides of the aisle. They're all friends of Israel, and we should do everything possible to maintain this.
Which is so why being involved with the Hebrew University and part of the American Friends is you're spreading a different type of diplomacy in values that are created through education and not just about war or about things that...
Well, it's much more than that. When you come to the university, I'll tell you about I'll show you a second very important Jewish value. We spoke about education. The second Jewish value that is extremely important to me is that share with those that are less fortunate than you are everything that you are blessed with. What do I mean by that?
Yeah.
You come to the university and I'll show you 3 international programs that we have. I'll take just one. International Master in Public Health, okay? Every year we take 23 kids from Africa. We bring them to the university. They study at the prestigious School of Medicine for a whole year. For a whole year. They finish, they get their degree, they fly back to their countries. In most cases, they become the persons responsible for public health in their own country. In one case, one became
Public health administrators.
Yes, in one case, one became a minister. Now, why do I mention this? Because the scholarships I give to each and every one of these are the costliest.
Wow.
I have to pay for their tickets, for their tuition, for their lodging, for their living expenses for a whole year. You want to know the figure?
I would say you're building a better community by doing that.
Yeah.
It's probably $100,000 a year or more.
I'm building a better Israel by that.
Yes, you are.
Because this is a Jewish value. I mean, we have the knowledge, we have the people, and if we can help those that are less fortunate. By the way, we do the same thing in agriculture. We have a similar program in agriculture.
So this is a 100% scholarship type program for people that are coming from
People cannot,
third world countries.
people cannot afford, or from the Palestinian Authority, people cannot afford. People cannot afford this, you know. It's a lot of money. And by the way, tuition at Hebrew University is very little. You know how
It's
much?
subsidized.
How much is tuition?
Well, I know in the United States it's almost
$80,000,
$89,000.
Okay, then it's 1 week's worth of studying here is what you pay.
Really?
4,000, yes.
Amazing that you could do
Okay.
it for that.
Okay. But for those students that I bring from Africa, I need 12, 13, 14 times that money.
Of course you do.
Because you have to fly the tickets, you have the lodging, you have the living expenses.
You also have, I understand in your enrollment at Hebrew University, you have a lot of Arab students. It's not just Israelis, it's not just people from the United States.
Well, I wish you had asked this question at the very beginning. When you come to the university, you see that the signage is trilingual. It's
It is.
Hebrew, Arabic, and English. 20%, 20% of the first year students at Hebrew U are Arabs.
20.
17% of the entire student body are Arabs.
Coming from a cross section of the Arab world.
Not from the Arab world, but coming from Israel and the Palestinian territories.
Okay.
Now, certain disciplines, you go to nursing, you go to pharmaceutical, it's 90% Arabs.
Oh, interesting.
Come to Jerusalem and all the pharmacists you'll meet are Arabs that graduated from our university. And we're very proud of it.
Of course.
We're very proud of it. So yes, I mean, we're called Hebrew University, but
Well, we're sort of demystifying it as being something that's beyond that.
I'll tell you more than this. I'll tell you more than this. When the war started, October 7th, the next day, we as management met in order to, decide on our priorities. We realized that 7,000 of our students were called for duty.
How many?
7,000.
That's more than 25% of the whole enrollment.
That's even more than that, but because 7,000 of the first of the bachelor degree. They came back. There has not been one single incident of a clash or tension between Arab students and Jewish students.
That's amazing in comparison to what we've seen in the United States.
Not a single incident to this very day, 14 months.
What do you attribute that to? That's an amazing
Well, I
phenomena.
attribute it to a lot of work that was invested in talking to the professors, talking to the students, identifying the courses that are problematic. We even went as far as typing T-shirts for the students in Arabic and in Hebrew. We learned we learned together But the fact is, not a single violent incident, which means that probably we're doing something right.
You are definitely doing something right, because we can't say the same thing here in the United States. It's been very tumultuous. Right here up the street at UCLA, we had tremendous rioting and destruction of a beautiful campus.
I'll tell you something about this, because one of the things that I do at the university together with a number of my senior colleagues is to really follow very closely this calls for boycott and for this, and I've traveled across Europe in some of the universities and two notions that are so basics and cannot be ignored. One, the two words academy and boycott cannot live in the same universe.
Yeah, they can't coexist together.
They cannot coexist. I mean, academy is about exchange of values, exchange of ideas, exchange of
in an open environment.
Yes, and the second thing which is holy, sacred in the academic world is that reach whatever conclusion you want to reach after having studied and analyzed. And when we talked to these universities in Europe, they said, for God's sake, nobody was approaching us. You were not approaching us even to ask questions. Now let's see, here we are, the top management of the university. Tell us, what is it that is of concern to you? So you know what? They start, okay, Mount Scopus, which is the main university, the main campus, is an occupied Palestinian territory, which is the most stupid thing. Mount Scopus is where the university was established in 1918, the cornerstone. Mount Scopus has always been an Israeli territory. Even during the war, the years between 1948 and 1967, the university and the Hadassah Hospital were an enclave, a Jewish enclave. And besides, I tell them, listen, I used to run the Foreign Service. I know the sensitivities of ambassadors. Every European ambassador comes to visit me on Mount Scopus. If there was even the slightest of a doubt that this is occupied territory, they wouldn't come.
No, they wouldn't.
So they said, oh, sorry. Then some of them apologized. Then they say, you are a public university.
Right.
You are an agent of the government. Well, I mean, because I'm on camera, I won't use some colorful language that I used there.
I can't picture that.
You can't picture that. You better do. Yes, we are a public university, but in Europe, all universities are 100% public.
That's right.
So what if we are a public university? There is a very, very clear distinction
between government and...
Government does not intervene in academia. And this is a rule that is kept, religiously. Government never tells the academia what to teach, how to teach, what to teach.
So there's been no protest, violent or non-violent, on that campus?
In Jerusalem?
Yes.
There were only two very quiet protests, one Palestinian students, one Jewish students, but that was it. No violence, no nothing. Protest, of course, we encourage students to voice whatever concerns they have, but no violence at all.
Let's shift gears to October 7th, and I know it's a very difficult time, and you probably talked about it till you're tired of talking about it, but it was a very poignant time. I myself went to visit in April a number of the kibbutzes and the fairgrounds, and it was just a horrible thing to have witnessed. In thinking back to it, in your own days in government and having worked with the Jordanians and the Palestinians and various peace accords, and seeing Israel today, a much stronger country, both militarily and technology, How do you think, from a lapse of security, this could have happened the way it did?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you something. And October 7 has undoubtedly been the worst day in the Jewish history since the Holocaust. Certainly the worst day in the history of the modern Jewish state of Israel. And the fact that we have 100 hostages to this very day in the dungeons of Gaza, I mean, is something that is so horrific to even half
Pulls
of them,
at the soul of
half of
country.
them alive and half of them not. And if there is something that is a top priority for all of us, before anything else, is our commitment or the commitment of the government to bring them back to their families, to bring the dead for proper burial and to bring the alive for rehabilitation and for, this is the primary responsibility. And then the government will have a lot to look into in analyzing.
So there'll be a lot of post
Oh,
conflict analysis.
I think that we have to. I mean, there seems to be a ray of hope, but again, we've learned in the last 14 months not to be overtaken by, with the ceasefire in the north,
Yes.
and maybe some of the voices coming out of the south now. But again, after so many months, there's only one thing that I as a Jew can think of, and this is the fate of these poor people, some of them babies, some of them very old people. And then we will have to think twice, think about what is it that led us to this catastrophe. What is it that led us to this catastrophe?
And that book is still being written.
Because it was a catastrophe. The number of Israelis that were butchered, killed, massacred, burned alive, among...
I saw the evidence of that.
No, I mean, it's clear. I mean,
kibbutzes.
families, entire families. I mean, this is something that should not have happened. But then we have to think also, okay, look forward. Where do we go from there? And the other challenge is to unite the people, to bring the people together.
To reunite them.
To reunite the people and to bring them together and to see where is it. Again, I mean, we all have our explanations and speculations and what happened there, and it is clear that it was a total failure of the military, total failure of the intelligence, total failure of the political, clear.
But yet the country has so much resilience. I mean, your enrollment is down because of this. Companies' workforces are down because of it. Families have been moved from the north into hotels. And there's been so much disruption.
I'll tell you one thing. Yes, I mean, the tragedy has proportions that we have never seen before. But one thing we know, and this is that we cannot afford to lose a war. The first war we lose is the last war we fight. And yes, I mean, the beginning was very, very tough, but then you saw the spirit of these young people, and you saw the spirit of volunteers all around the country. I look at my own university. You know, when the war broke out, the professors from dentistry, I mean, volunteered to identify remains of bodies that were so badly burned that there was no DNA left. So they identified them by the teeth.
Wow.
The professors from the Faculty of Agriculture volunteered to go to the south to help with harvesting the crops. This is what we did. Yours truly, I mean, helped with picking strawberries.
Well, I saw the evidence of how some of the kibbutzes were just almost barren now after being so fertile because there was no one there.
Well, and again, I mean, this is much more. I really hope that now you do see the return. Now you do see the return, but these are really the tragedy. It's something that is not. I mean, a simple mind like mine cannot comprehend. Families being wiped out. I mean, families with their children being burned alive. I mean, one next to the other.
It's hard to imagine.
This is something that.
Well, we hope and we pray for peace. This podcast will be seen by a number of my colleagues and friends in the real estate industry, and the theme of it, as I've talked about, is called Building Better Communities.
Tell your friends that next year is a very, very special year in Israel.
And it's the 100th anniversary, right?
It's the 100th anniversary. And next year is a very special year in the history of the Hebrew University, which is the history of the State of Israel. So we're going to have a huge board of governors with hundreds of friends from all around the world coming to with us to. I don't like the word celebrate because this is not time for celebration. To recognize the importance of science to the well-being of not only the Jerusalem or the Israeli or the Jewish people, but the world at large. What some of our scientists have done, together with leading scientists here in this country, have made our lives so much better.
Well, just alone in that little fruit and that cherry tomato, you've done that.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, you are in the business of food, okay, then the other thing was to prolong the shelf life of tomatoes and cucumbers. I mean, back in the old days,
yes, that's right.
I used to go to the market. I mean, the tomato was good for 3 days, and then it would rot.
It didn't taste good. It tasted mealy.
Nowadays, the pepper and the cucumber and this are there for. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Gal. Ambassador Yossi Gal, President of University Advancement and External Relations.
Vice President.
Vice President. I've given you an extra title. I've advanced you. I've learned something from you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in the United States. Thank you for coming to Los Angeles.
Pleasure.
And it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much.
Very much.